Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Schaus, and we're coming to you live today from Washington, D.C. Today is a class on the GSA schedule, and we're doing this in partnership with the Virginia PTAP. We want to thank them for their support and helping to promote the event. And I'm now going to turn it over to Lisa Wood, who is the statewide director, hopefully I'm getting this right, of the Virginia PTAC. And Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Once again, I'm Lisa Wood. I'm the statewide director of the Virginia PTAC. PTACs are at GMU, and we offer free one-on-one counseling to firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. If you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to explore what PTACs can offer. Thank you and enjoy the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And thanks everybody who has joined us today. At the end of the presentation, you'll get an email that has a link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides. We've got a ton of complimentary webinars and videos on our YouTube channel. And you can also find a lot of great resources, as Lisa mentioned, at the PTAP. So just a quick blurb about us. We are based in Washington, D.C. and provide professional services for federal contractors. I'll say pretty much at all stages of the government contracting life cycle. So if you're just starting out, we can help you with some market analysis to understand who is your customer and how do they purchase and what contract vehicles and or certifications you should be pursuing. But I'd say the large majority of our clients are small, but on the larger side of small, as well as large businesses. Some of our services are listed here. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got 400 plus, I think it's actually 450 now, free webinars all about government contracting, some of which were done with the Virginia PTAP. They're on our website. They're categorized there by topic, or you could just go to YouTube and follow our channel there to get updates. Just a couple things that are happening over the next 2 weeks. Next week, we are doing our Hot Topics in Government Contracting winter session. We'll be talking about the PPP, the Payment Protection Plan. We'll be talking about CMMC and Mentor Protege program and some other topics. There's a link there. It's also on our website. We have a monthly series that is comprised of 4 subject matter experts. It's held the second Friday of every month, and each month we cover a new topic. March, we'll be covering bid protests. February, we covered OTAs. January, we covered CMMC. All of those recordings and PowerPoints are on our website as well. If anyone's into defense, pursuing defense contracting, the DFARS, which is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, saying that 10 times fast, we uncover each part. Typically an attorney is our guest speaker, and we do those on Wednesday. They're complimentary, and those will go throughout the year. Last year we covered the FAR. Again, every part was uncovered, and the links to those, again, complimentary on our website and YouTube channel. And those should serve as a good resource, even for today's discussion. If you want to go back and look at how the government conducts market research, that's going to be in one of the FAR sections, to really understand. If you kind of reverse engineering, you want to understand who is your customer and kind of what is their mindset, how are they thinking, you know, how do they make decisions on whether they should use a schedule or they should put something out for bid. The FAR is going to give you all of those rules, which is basically what they need to follow. Okay, and today's agenda, I believe we're here for 2 hours. We're going to take some questions at the end. However, if you do have questions as we're going through the presentation, just so you don't lose your train of thought and don't feel like you need to save your question until the end, you can go ahead on the right-hand side of your screen. You should see a dialog box, and I believe it's either it says questions or it says chat. You can type your question in there. I'll read those off at the end after I take a big sip of water. They'll be anonymous, so don't feel, I'm not going to read off anybody's name, so don't feel embarrassed to ask a question that you feel I don't know. There's no stupid questions is what I'm saying. So sending your questions, I'll read them off. And if anybody wants to discuss anything offline, happy to do that as well. Okay, so I mentioned we're here for 2 hours. The agenda is going to go through a quick overview about GSA. We'll talk about the basics of the schedule, the process, the components, some timelines, and best practices. And obviously we are going to talk about what's in it for you, which you may or may not be surprised. So this is pretty much an introductory course that should give you the basics, and hopefully by the end of today you can you'll have some tools to conduct some research and due diligence to understand, is there upside in it for you and your specific company? That answer is going to be different for everybody that's on the line today. Just because it's right for you and you're maybe a small women-owned IT professional services firm does not mean that it's right for your neighbor who perhaps might also be a small women-owned IT professional services firm. A lot of this just comes down to relationships and how your customer prefers to purchase. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to, like I said, move on through the slides here, and feel free to type in your questions. Don't feel like you need to save them until the end. So first and foremost, who is GSA? Who are we talking about here today? General Services Administration. Got up on the slide here, they're a non-appropriated agency. And what does that mean? It means that they are not receiving any taxpayer funding. So they are self-funded through two mechanisms or two channels. One is PBS, which is the Public Building Service. GSA is the largest business landlord in the DC metro area. So they own all of the government buildings. And then they collect money there, and then they also make money through the GSA schedule holders. So through the contracts, contractors are required to pay a fee called the industrial funding fee. We'll talk about this later in the presentation. And that fee is 0.75% of your GSA schedule sales. So at times you want to think of GSA as a for-profit entity. They're a processing center, more or less, when we're talking about the schedules program. So they're motivated by companies that want to get on the schedule and have an opportunity lined up that's, that has some big dollar signs next to it, because they will then, meaning GSA, will then receive this 0.75% of that very large contract that you're about to receive. GSA also maintains all of these public websites. So when you go to Beta SAM, or back in the day when we went to FBDS or USA Spending, GSA is the curator of those and all of the content. So they do a lot, and I think it's important just to understand the beast that we're dealing with here, and kind of how they're organized and what they're motivated by and what their mentality is. Okay, so when we talk about the basics, so we're just slicing out the GSA schedule portion of GSA now. It's a contract vehicle, meaning that it is a mechanism for government buyers across federal agencies to get to you. It gives them a box to check to say, this is how I'm going to procure these goods, services, or software. From the vendor perspective, it's a marketing tool, meaning that it's kind of the bright, shiny object that is appealing not only to potential partners, but also to your buyers, because it makes it a little bit easier for them to get to you. So that's one plus there for what's in it for you. However, it is absolutely not required to do business with the government. Marketing tool only. So basically, it's letting you into we'll just say kind of dedicated room of opportunities, but you're still going to need to hunt and find a dance partner here. If we took a pie chart, and there is a slide further in the presentation that we've got that demonstrates how the government purchases, you'll see that at GSA schedules, on average, now this is going to vary from company to company and product to product and service to service, but typically it's only used, and I say only, about 10 to 15% of the time, which is a small slice. It still represents billions of dollars, but 10% of the time it's used in federal acquisitions. And right now we're just talking about GSA schedules, and they have different flavors of schedules that you guys have probably heard of. GSA, the Oasis contract, and STARS, and VETS, and the others, but we're just talking about the plain old vanilla GSA schedule. So it's a small percentage, so before you go down the path, you want to make sure that, again, this is the preferred method that your customer uses when they purchase. Roughly, you've got about 18 to 20,000 vendors that hold the GSA schedule, and 60% or more, so more than half of the vendors have zero sales through their schedule. Now, they may have a $5 million contract with the Air Force, and $10 million contract with HHS, and $7 million contract with Commerce, but specifically through their schedule, they have zero sales. And what does that tell us? It tells us either they had the mentality, because I wouldn't call this a strategy of build it and they will come, because it's not a great strategy or very wise, or somebody sold them something that they didn't need. So don't go getting these certifications, for example, 8A certification, or getting the contract vehicle GSA schedule, and then and not realize what the liabilities are with each of these. So basically what I'm saying is read the fine print before you go down the path. GSA schedules are also based on your lowest prices. So it is GSA's goal to get you at your lowest rate possible for each and every line item that you're trying to offer through the schedule. So if you're selling widgets and your widget is typically $100, but you gave ABC company a rate of $90, GSA will try to negotiate you down to that. And we'll talk about pricing later in the presentation. There are also price restrictions post-award, and I should have added a word in here, commercial price restrictions. So, or basically anything outside of your GSA schedule. So you're not going to be allowed to offer anybody outside of GSA a rate that is lower than your GSA rate. If you do, bells and whistles should be going off inside your accounting system. Smoke should be coming out of it, because you're then going to have to notify GSA and lower your GSA rate to that same amount. So there's a lot of sometimes more cons than pros to the GSA schedule. So you want to make sure, again, that you've read the fine print, that you understand exactly what you're signing up for, and that this is going to benefit you and not be more of a liability that you're carrying on your back. Okay, so the schedule, a little bit of upside here. It can be used by all of federal government. GSA uses the GSA schedule, not all the time, but they do. SBA, I mean, every federal government agency and department has the ability to purchase from the GSA schedule. Makes it much easier for the buyers, because you have been vetted by GSA, not only on your past performance, not only on your quality control, your corporate experience, your internal policies and procedures, but also GSA has, as I mentioned earlier, negotiated you down to your lowest rate. So when buyers are coming in, they know that that this is the absolute lowest rate possible. It could almost be, let's say, compared to shopping at Costco, or one of these companies or institutions that has negotiated lower rates. So that is the plus side for the buyers. It makes it easier for them. However, your rates will be a lot lower than what you're probably selling in the commercial world. So what's in it for you? I decided to throw in some Rodney Dangerfield here. It does give you some respect. It gives you some street credibility. It shows that you have jumped through all the hoops of GSA to navigate their requirements. You've got the past performance, you've got the lowest prices, and so GSA will, because again, you have to think of them as a for-profit entity, they are more or less marketing for you as well. And this is why they've done I'll say GSA has done a great job of marketing themselves as well as the vendors. In some ways, perhaps a detriment to some of the vendors, the 63% that have zero sales for their name because everybody sees GSA schedules everywhere and they see the logo and they think it's either required or they think they get on the schedule and their phone's going to ring off the hook, and that's obviously not the case. But they will advocate for you. It will also help eliminate some competition. So if you're up against another company that perhaps does not have the GSA schedule and that's the preferred method of your buyer, this can help perhaps tip the scales in your favor. You've responded to a sources sought or an RFI, request for information, and you list in any of these that you have a GSA schedule, coupled with perhaps some unique technical experience or some unique past performance that will help put you over the edge. These are ways to potentially box out your competition. So you can certainly, there are other ways the government purchases through sole source, but aside from sole source, your next best bet is really just to limit your competition as much as possible. And this is one way to do that, again, in addition to perhaps having a unique technical capability and or some unique past performance that relates then to that solicitation. Also, once you're on the schedule, you'll be privy to certain RFPs, requests for proposals, that are dedicated just to your offering on the schedule, you and the other vendors that also are selling those similar items. GSA, I think it was, it may have been 2019, started to make an effort to make the GSA dedicated RFPs publicly available as they pursued a greater transparency agenda. And I think part of the motivation there, which I thought was a good idea, was by showing these RFPs that can only be responded to by schedule holders, it then allowed the prospective vendors who wanted to get onto the schedule an idea of, hey, once we get onto the schedule, or any of these RFPs, anything that we would respond to, which is certainly a good idea, because then that might give you some insight into what you're missing out on. And if what you're missing out on is a bunch of junk that you would not respond to, then hey, maybe that helps make your decision not to pursue the schedule, which can be a wise decision. Again, it's going to vary from company to company. The other thing is you don't want to get onto the schedule and then be reactive to the RFPs that are dedicated just to these schedule holders. Really, you should be proactive and helping to shape the opportunities so that when the program manager that you have the relationship with works with their contracting officer and the RFP comes out, you know that the specs in that statement of work have been geared towards you. And you are anticipating that RFP because you've done a demo at the agency and you've built relationships, and again, you're written into the specs of the contract. Okay, I think I've got a question or two coming in. Let's just stop and see. And the question reads, through what method do they obtain previous contract pricing and post-contract pricing? So I'm not sure if you're talking about they, GSA, or they, the vendor, but GSA. Okay, so GSA obtains previous contract pricing, meaning if they're comparing your pricing to other vendors on the schedule. There's a couple websites you can go to. One is gsaadvantage.gov, and that's going to be in some of the later slides once we talk about pricing. You can also go to the calc.gsa.gov, and you would type in your labor category there and come up with average rates. So if you've got a program manager or project manager, you would go to the calc.gsa.gov site, type in program manager, and you want to be specific there. So if your program manager requires 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree, you would plug that in. Again, we've got some screenshots later in the presentation on that, and the average GSA rate would show up there. And that would be one of the barometers that GSA is using to compare your rates. And yes, this is what they would use to compare you and kind of push you to these lower rates. There's 2 litmus tests, but we'll get into that in the pricing section. So thank you for the question. And I think I skipped it. So the process. I cannot reiterate enough that you really want to spend a lot of time, and Lisa and I were talking about this before we jumped into the presentation, but really conducting the market research. This market, meaning the public sector, the federal government, even at the state and local level, but the federal government is one of the only sectors that has all of this free data. Now, I'm not saying all the websites are easy to navigate and easy to use, but there are also companies out there, data aggregators, that will that you can pay a monthly subscription for and have this data in a easy to use format. And you can just do a Google search for them. I'm also happy to provide some names later. That these companies will aggregate all this data, so you can then find out, who is purchasing from the GSA schedule, how much are they spending. But because this data is out there, you really want to take advantage of it. If you're selling into hospitals, you're not going to find out who the incumbent is that was selling the bed linens or cleaning services there, or the cafeteria services. You're going to have to go in and do in person, or start cold calling or emailing. Here you can go to a website. I've done a couple search parameters and come back with some very rich data that will make you proactive and help refine who you should be selling to, when you should be selling, where you should be selling, who you should be partnering with, who the competitors are, and basically just the overall landscape. So take advantage of that. And GSA is one of many, many, many contract vehicles. Yes, it's one of many ways the government purchases. We'll get to this chart eventually that kind of lays it out in a nice format, but every agency and every department also has its own contract vehicle. So you've got Navy Seaport E, NASA SOUP, HHS has their contract vehicle, State Department has a contract vehicle, OPM has a contract vehicle. So before you go getting on GSA, maybe your services are really specialized and great for OPM. And maybe they do use the schedule, but they prefer their own contract vehicle. So make sure you understand, again, who's your customer, how do they purchase, before you go buying the fancy GSA schedule. I say buying, or investing your time and effort into getting listed when really your margins will be small. And I think there's another question here, bear with me. If our current contract rates are low, we are a sub, and we want to get on the schedule, and we increase our rates, which are realistic and in line with other companies on the schedule, would that be okay? Yes, you would have to show invoices that indicate that you have sold your software, your services, your product at higher rates, and justify your rates. You also then want to make sure that you've conducted that due diligence on either the GSA Advantage or the Calc site. So you know in advance where GSA is going to push you. If your average rate for a program manager is $200 and that's what you need to stay profitable, and again, being very specific, let's say 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree, you go onto the Calc site and the average rate there is $100 per hour, and you can't live with that and you're not going to make any money, then the GSA schedule may not be right for you. Once you've scaled your company and you're able to kind of live with those average rates, then you may want to kind of green light the schedule and take some other factors into consideration as well. Okay, as we move along here, and keep the questions coming. It's good because it gives me a break to kind of ensure that you guys it's harder to do these things online than it is in a classroom where I can, step aside and pull something up on a whiteboard. So if we just look at the pie chart here on the right, this is generally speaking, again, this chart is going to be absolutely different for each and every company that is on here, and you should know the answers, you should know the percentages here for your business. So generally speaking, the government is putting the bulk of what they purchase out for competition. So anybody with an internet connection that can go to betasam.gov and look for RFPs, RFQs, and RFIs, they are then going to be able to respond. Obviously, they're not always going to win, and you need to meet all of the terms, conditions, and everything that's in the statement of work in order to win. But the bulk of how the government purchases is going to be through full and open competition. I mentioned the department and agency vehicles. That's going to be your Navy Seaport E, the NASA SOUP, and name a department and they've got a contract vehicle. So make sure you understand, is that your customer's preferred method, or do they like the schedule? Set-asides come into play as well. Simplified acquisition, sole source, other transaction authorities. That number actually may have gone up a little bit. And then just other mechanisms that the government purchases. Looks like we've got another question here. Sorry, the font on the questions is very small. Do you have to build a LCAT in order to put it on the schedule? What the government is looking for, so labor categories, or LCAT, meaning a job title, a professional service that you're offering, in order to, whether it's a labor category or a product or a software, first and foremost, and the easiest way to get something listed on the schedule is by showing an invoice that you have sold this in the past. If you don't have that, you can have a contract with that awarded rate. So you would want all the official documentation from that. If you don't have that, third best, which I would not recommend, is a proposal. So if you have an official proposal to a company or to the government that says, here's a list of our labor categories that we're bidding, and here's the associated rate. Even if you didn't win, that proposal can suffice. Again, I wouldn't recommend that. The easiest way just to get on without any pause or hesitation from the GSA side is by having a true and hard invoice to show that you have sold that product or service in the past. And it would also just show that you're a seasoned company, that you have billed these services or this product in the past, and it does not need to be a government invoice. It could be an invoice to McDonald's or ABC company. And so if you're somewhat of a junior company, again, I would kind of give you a little bit of a yellow light here and say, hey, have you done your homework? What's your real reason for getting onto the schedule? Do you have a pipeline full of specific opportunities for your specific company, your specific solution that an agency wants to specifically purchase from you through the schedule? Okay, the next question is, are all opportunities listed on FedBiz Ops, whether they are buying on or off the schedule? So FedBiz Ops is now betasam.gov, and those opportunities that the government is required to list are any opportunities that are over $25,000. And I mentioned earlier that GSA, in an effort to let's say be more transparent, has started to list some of the GSA opportunities on that site. I'm not sure how far along they've gotten, but typically the only people, let's just say right now, snapshot of February 2021, the only folks that can see, the only organizations that are going to be able to see the GSA schedule opportunities, generally speaking, are going to be the schedule holders. So they may continue to move in that direction as far as GSA trying to be more transparent and listing these opportunities to give prospective vendors an idea of, hey, it looks like all these GSA RFPs we thought were going to be so great, and once we got on the schedule, we're going to have a gold mine. But when they start seeing the RFPs, they realize, oh, this isn't really, it's very specific. I can tell that somebody was in there and worked it, which is really the sign of a successful contractor or vendor. So just keep this in mind. This slide, to me, this is the most important takeaway. If you're not able to specifically fill in those percentages for your company by using the various websites that are out there, or any of the data aggregators, or working with your PTAC or us to provide to get a market analysis and then make some decisions. Because let's just say you conducted a market analysis and full and open competition for your specific solution comes back at 50%, and GSA schedule shows up at 3%. Why go through the headache of getting on the schedule and there's not going to be much there for you? You probably then want to invest whatever money you had put aside for GSA schedule into perhaps a sales rep and a part-time sales rep and part-time proposal writer, because you want to work the opportunity, get written into the solicitation, and then have that proposal writer help craft your response. Why allocate your money for something that's only going to give you, 3%? Again, that's just a hypothetical, and again, these percentages will be different for every company. So again, as Lisa and I said earlier today, do your homework. It's all out there, so take advantage of that opportunity of having this free data, and invest the time up front versus just being reactive to the market, because everybody else, I can tell you, out there is being reactive. So be proactive and take advantage of this data. Okay, talk about the process, the homework that you can conduct, and we'll dig into some of the pricing in further detail, and hopefully some of the visuals might help clarify some of the questions that came in. If not, just feel free to retype your question and I can try to answer it in a different format. So how do your prices compare? If you've got products or software, you want to go to the gsaadvantage.gov site, and then for services, the calc.gsa.gov. This is a snapshot or a screenshot, sorry, of the calc site. So what I typed in here was project manager, and then if you look over on the right hand side, we set the education level to minimum bachelor's degree, and then minimum experience is 5 years, which is the yellow box that's highlighted, and then 45 years is the default, so you just keep that there. And then it shows that the GSA average is $140 per hour. Now, again, if you're a project manager who also, has a bachelor's degree in 5 years, is, as I mentioned earlier, billing at $200, unless you have something specific in your description, this person also must, hold a security clearance, or this person must be able to walk on their head for 10 hours, something unique. Obviously it's an extreme example and silly, but unless you have something very unique in your job description to warrant the $200, GSA is going to push you to the $140. So again, before you go down the GSA schedule path, do some homework up front so you know where basically the cards that GSA is going to be holding during the negotiation. And this is just a continuation of the screenshot. It's too much information to put on one slide. So again, that average price is the $140. As you scroll down, again, this is the calc.gsa.gov site. You'll see a list of all of the vendors. And so this is obviously just showing the first one. I think the default is that they sort it by the lowest price. Now you can export this into an Excel spreadsheet. And so there could be some creative ways that you can use this data for teaming and partnering and being a subcontractor to somebody on the schedule and looking at their rates versus your rates. And, do you want to work with somebody that is offering rates lower than yours? No. So you can, again, use this as homework to decide, if you're a small business and you want to subcontract to a large company, you should use this to do some homework to make sure that if you go after ABC company, that their project manager rate is not going to be $90 an hour when yours is 140, because they're going to ask you, they're basically, well, they're going to ask you, they're going to dictate you, hey, we need 100 project managers, and the rate that we're going to give you is $85, or it could even be less than that. So before you go through the hoops and putting in the time and effort of trying to pursue these partnerships, joint venture, mentor protege, subcontracting, however you're going to skin the cat here, do the homework to understand what are their prices. And most of the big guys will have a GSA schedule, so this will give you some indication roughly of where their pricing is. And looks like we have a question. Okay, what site is that with the hourly rates? Again, calc.gsa.gsa.gov. And let me just go back 2 slides. So right here at the bottom, if you're selling products or software, you want to go to gsaadvantage.gov. If you're selling services, meaning hourly rates, professional services, it's the calc.gsa.gov. Okay, and this is just as we further scroll down on the calc site using that same example. That'll give you the company names. It's much easier again if you drop this into an Excel spreadsheet and can kind of sort through it. And some companies may call a certain job title a project manager, and you may call it something different, but this is really just comparing those specific job titles to each other. Okay, so that is part of the homework, and I highly encourage you to, whether you're getting a schedule or not, there's a lot of good information on the GSA site. So again, let's say you decide not to get the schedule, but you want to pursue a subcontracting relationship with Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, whoever it is. Most likely those organizations are going to have a schedule. So jump over here, see what their rates are. Go to Beta SAM, find out what contracts they have. If you have a footprint at, I don't know, HUD or HHS, and it looks like they have a contract that's coming up for a recompete, that gives you some talking points. Hey, we also work at HUD, and you guys are providing program management services, and we've got program managers at a competitive rate. We'd love to work with you, and be very, very specific when you kind of go down that path. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there, going off on subcontracting. So as you do your homework, you'll download the GSA solicitation, which is an open and rolling RFP, request for proposal. So just like any RFP that you would see on the Beta SAM site, the GSA schedule is solicitation as well. So it has no due date. It's just we'll have updates throughout the year that you'll need to comply with. But you want to make sure that you meet or exceed all of the qualifications. And that goes back even to the question about what can you use for a pricing justification? An invoice, if you don't have an invoice, then your company is probably a little early stage, and you probably want to wait until you do have an invoice or several invoices for each and every one of your line items. Because the GSA schedule is an RFP, where do we find RFPs? Those are on the betasam.gov site, just like all the other RFP, RFQs, and RFIs. And just because you meet all of the requirements to get onto the schedule does not mean that it's a great fit. So I always kind of picture the roller coaster ride at the fair. And just because you're tall enough to ride it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it or that it's going to be a great experience for you. So again, do the homework, because back to that chart, what if the government is buying most of your services or your product through either set-asides or full and open competition? No need to go down this path. Now, it may be a gold mine for you. Most of your services or products are being purchased through the schedule, then that's great. But make sure that you have, that you know the reason why you're getting onto the schedule. And the best answer for this, in my opinion, is that you have a pipeline of opportunities, specific opportunities And those opportunities, you have relationships with the government who has specifically indicated that they want to buy from you or something that you offer through the schedule. So again, just because you're able to meet all the requirements doesn't mean it's a good decision. Looks like we've got another question here, or a couple questions here. Okay, bear with me. In a previous slide, you mentioned that GSA schedule contract award criteria is typically based on lowest cost, best value. Are there strategies to ensure that you have a competitive bid, but without getting into a price war that diminishes validity of the average rates shown on calc.gsa.gov? Well, first and foremost, do your homework. How can you get the highest rate possible? By having invoices that show a higher rate, by having something unique in your job description, by having, instead of having job titles by being a little bit strategic with your job title. So if you are providing professional services, let's say you have program managers, and I just use that because it's kind of generic throughout various industries to have a program or a project manager. So one way to be creative and strategic is by having different levels. So maybe you have a program manager level 1 who has 5 years of experience and a bachelor, and that person is billed at $75 an hour. And then you also have a program manager level 2 who has, let's say, 8 years of experience and a bachelor's, and they're billed at $100 per hour. And then the program manager level 3 perhaps has 10 years of experience and a master's, and they are billed at $150 per hour. So this way, once you're on the schedule and you've got these kind of bands of job titles, as you start bidding for work, then you're not just pigeonholed into a $75 an hour rate, that you have some freedom and flexibility within the project manager or whatever job titles you have to bid at different rates. Obviously, you want to make sure that you've got the resumes behind each of those to back them up, that you've got the invoices for each of those to back up the rates, and so forth. So that would be one way, but I mean, just most importantly is really just looking at, what's the GSA average rate, because that's hard data, and there's a little bit harder to negotiate with GSA when that's the source that they are going to use as well. So, if you think of it like playing poker, look at their hand before you decide to enter the game. And again, what other industry gives you this much data? So use it, use it, use it. Next question is the GSA multiple award schedule always open for enrollment? But then specific schedules such as 8A stars, 3 and HCATs have limited window openings. I am confused between the difference. Yeah, so today we are just talking about kind of the vanilla GSA schedule, the multiple award schedule that's been consolidated through various phases over the years, and that is an open and rolling solicitation, an open and rolling RFP that you can find on betasam.gov. Now, within GSA, they have these kind of, we'll say, different flavors, such as this 8A stars, Vets and Oasis and all the others. Those typically have they have an actual due date. And those will have different parameters and requirements that you'll need to meet as well. But today we're just talking about, again, just really kind of the general generic GSA schedule. And I think that was maybe the last question there. Thank you guys for the questions. Okay, so we talked about meeting the requirements, doing the homework, and I'm gonna move on here. So should you decide that, yes, we're going to pursue this, and hopefully you're not saying, yes, let's roll the dice, you should really have a specific reason, if not reasons, meaning opportunities / relationships that you are pursuing the schedule. So like any good proposal writer would do, you want to map out your timeline, have a compliance matrix, make sure you've got a quality control piece to this to ensure that by the time you start the proposal, because there is no due date, it makes it a little sometimes harder to manage, especially if you're a small business and then you get busy with another opportunity that maybe you're being reactive to. And then you come back to the GSA schedule proposal a couple months later and you didn't notice that GSA made some updates to the solicitation. So you end up then responding to an old solicitation, your proposal will be rejected by GSA. So quality control is always important. And then there's obviously the submission, which is an effort in itself as well. And it looks like there's another question. Thank you for answering the questions. You're welcome. Keep on coming, guys. Okay. And okay, so we're going to talk about the proposal components. Just like any solicitation, you're going to have an administrative, a technical, and a pricing section. And so we'll talk about these in further detail. So first is the administrative, and these are just the requirements. And again, the slides will be emailed to everybody when we finish, as well as the recording. So you'll need the last 2 years, full years, so 24 months of your balance sheet and income statement. I would suggest if you're on a calendar year, let's say you're submitting your proposal to GSA tomorrow or next week. So you would include your 2019 balance sheet and income statement, your 2020 balance sheet and income statement, and then if you have your year-to-date, January, February, balance sheet and income statement, I would submit those as well. What usually then happens after your entire proposal is submitted to GSA, you get a welcome letter, and then 99.99% of the time you'll get an email from GSA from their finance center, and basically what they're looking for is a bank reference. The actual form is the standard form 527. So that gets sent to your bank completes some information and sends it to GSA. So you probably want to give your bank a heads up on that as well, and you can download the form through a simple Google search. It might even be, I don't think it's included in the solicitation documents. It's something, like I said, that comes later, but it doesn't come for everybody, but most of the time it does. There are 2, I'll call them GSA tests that you need to take. It should be a C-level exec within the company that is taking these. First is the readiness assessment. It's on the Vendor Support Center, VSC Vendor Support Center.gsa.gov. It's under education. And then the other is the Pathway to Success, also found on the VSC Vendor Support Center.gsa.gov. And the readiness assessment, give yourself at least an hour to go through that. The Pathway to Success, I'll say 30 minutes. Those both need to have been completed no more than 12 months beyond your submission date. So if you submit, let's say you take the test for both, you take these tests today and then you get busy for the next 13 months and you submit your proposal March of 2022 to GSA, your readiness assessment and your Pathway to Success would be invalid. And depending upon who you get at GSA, they could reject your entire offer. So make sure that those have a heartbeat within a 12-month period to the date of your submission. So that's the administrative, again, balance sheet, income statement, the readiness assessment, Pathway to Success. And so those, if you're kind of mapping this out, I'd give yourself, the first week, you could probably get those completed. Some people like to leave the readiness assessment and the Pathway to Success until the end and kind of do the harder work up front to make sure that the dates on the readiness assessment and Pathway to Success are still valid. Obviously, that's going to be if you think that this is going to take you more than a year to complete, and some companies may not plan on that, but that can end up being just the reality. Okay. Will GSA deny labor categories, meaning job titles that do not have invoice backing? Correct. Any product, service, or software that you want to propose to GSA, you need to indicate that you have sold these products, services, software in the past. And how do you do that? You do that with an invoice. Again, the invoices can be from either commercial, nonprofit, McDonald's, Little Sisters of the Poor, University of Maryland. It really doesn't matter. An invoice is an invoice is an invoice. So just make sure that you do have that invoice backing. Okay. Administrative section is continued here. You want to make sure that your SAM record is current and that you have the correct NAICS codes. So within the GSA schedule, the way that products, services, and software are identified is through a special item number. And there's probably about, I think it's 88 different special item numbers. So if you're selling IT professional services, the special item number is 54151S as in Sam. And there are other special item numbers. Now, some of these special item numbers you'll see are 6 digits, and they will perhaps at times be the same as the NAICS code. So if you were selecting a special item number for, let's say, the IT professional services 54151S, within the GSA solicitation, there will be specific NAICS codes, and NAICS is North American Industry Classification System, typically a 6-digit number that identifies what your solution is. So within the schedule, the SIN numbers, special item numbers, will have corresponding NAICS codes. You want to make sure that your NAICS codes are in your SAM record. And a lot of other information needs to be checked off in SAM in order for it to be able to say, quote unquote, compliant for the GSA schedule. You also here want to insert your tax ID number and your DUNS number. If you're using any authorized negotiators, meaning consultants like myself, or you have an attorney that's helping you with this that is going to be involved perhaps in your price negotiations or something along those lines, that person or organization should be listed. Any individuals within your company that are assisting, and typically it can be, depending upon the size of your company, proposal writer or proposal manager, or a finance person, CFO, bookkeeper, because there's different pieces of this proposal. Obviously the narrative pieces, but then the pricing. So you want to make sure that you've got the right people that are then going to be allowed to be on the phone call when you get to negotiations and just talking about pricing. The authorized negotiators should have a digital certificate. This will cost you anywhere from $100 to $300. And the digital certificate is just as it says, it is not a, it's digital, it's not a token, it's not a piece of paper, it's specific to a person and specific to a device, meaning your laptop, that allows you access to the GSA site to not only upload your offer, but post award to then make contract modifications. And that could be increasing your pricing, adding labor categories, even getting access to reporting and compliance for contract administration purposes, and looking at the RFPs. So the digital certificate, these are, there's a specific company, I believe it's IdenTrust. It's in the solicitation. So once you download the solicitation, you'll have the link to get to IdenTrust. You can either buy a 1, a 2, or a 3-year certificate, or at least you could last time that I ordered one. And so they're priced at roughly $100, $200, or $300. I highly recommend going with the 3-year so that you don't have to go through the process each year. It's basically downloading a short application that'll take you about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. You then need to go and get that documentation notarized, which with COVID at times can make it a little bit harder. You then mail this documentation with current identification, copies of current identification, meaning driver's license, passports, those sort of items to the IdenTrust Processing Center, and then you'll get an email with a link that you click on and you install a certificate on your computer. By then having that, it will allow you access to the GSA e-offer site, where you then upload your proposal to GSA. Again, that's an outside company, so a lot of times people say, how much does it cost to get a GSA schedule? And well, if you do it yourself, it's your own time and money, but you will need to buy this digital certificate, which is obviously an outside expense. It does not go to GSA, it goes to this private organization. You'll also want to make a note if you have previously had a GSA schedule under the same company name that you're submitting. If you have ever submitted a proposal that's been rejected, or if you've been on the schedule and had a canceled schedule because you did not meet the sales quota, which I think I was remiss in mentioning at the beginning of the presentation, which is $25,000 per year. So you need to bring in $25,000 per year through your schedule. The first year is a grace period, but for the life of the contract, which is potentially a 20-year contract, you need to bring in at least $25,000. If you're bringing in $5 million through the Air Force and it's not, or any agency or department, and it's not going through your schedule, GSA does not care. Again, think of GSA as a for-profit entity. They're motivated by the dollar. They're motivated by that industrial funding fee that you're going to pay them. So if you've got millions of dollars in contracts, good for you. But if they're not going through the schedule, then bad for you, because GSA will kick you off the schedule. You're costing them money to maintain people to oversee your contract when there's no revenue going through it. It looks like we have a question. Okay, we understood that the digital certificates would no longer be required and are being replaced by the FAS IDs. I believe correct, those are being phased out, but I believe still to get into the e-offer system, you will need the digital certificate. And then GSA has recently partnered with DocuSign for signing off on the actual contract awards. And then there's also the two-factor authentication, which is part of that FAS ID. Okay, so that is the administrative section here. And now we're going to move on to technical. So administrative, just to kind of recap what we've covered and kind of where we are. That administrative section, I'd give yourself, again, if you're kind of doing this internally, a week or two to kind of get through that, because again, you've got to get some documentation notarized, mail off the forms, and then they will eventually come back, and maybe just coordinating with your accountant to get your financial statements. Those do not need to be audited, by the way. I should have mentioned that. So your balance sheet and income statement for the last 2 years, preferably showing no losses. So again, they do not need to be audited, but you do want the full 24 months, and then anything that you have that's, we'll say year to date. That's assuming that you're on a calendar fiscal year. Okay. Everybody good so far? If you've got questions on anything that we covered up through administrative, I'll gonna take a sip of coffee here and let you guys type in anything that is unclear, you guys want clarification on. And I'm happy to go back to any slides that you want to look at again. Okay, so the technical section here is going to be comprised of various components, a corporate narrative, and this is basically about 6 or 7 questions that GSA has put together that you will answer. Same thing with the quality control. You're just not going to upload your internal quality control documentation. These are about 6 or 7 specific questions that GSA wants you to answer. There are limits on the characters and I'm sorry, the words, number of words for each of those answers. And these are kind of a cut and paste into the e-offer system. So, so just make sure that that you're not going above that, but make sure that you do take the time. I mean, this is really your chance to shine here in the technical section, to show that you do have the experience, that you do have the manpower, that sort of thing. Same thing there on the quality control. Answer each of the questions fully and completely. Don't leave anything for guessing. And then the next two pieces here, corporate narrative and quality control, you could probably write those each in, I don't know, an hour and a half. And if you're not able to, then again, you probably want to perhaps not pursue the schedule. These should be pretty easy. The questions are not anything that are out there to trick you. It's pretty self-explanatory. On the listed references, if anyone is on the line that's been around schedules for a while, there used to be an organization called Open Ratings. They were a subsidiary of Dun & Bradstreet, and they would require that you submit references to Open Ratings. Open Ratings would then contact your customers and ask them basically how your customer service was, how your pricing was, et cetera, et cetera. So Open Ratings no longer exists. So what GSA is requiring is that you list 3 to 5, and I would go for 5. Again, these could be government, they could be commercial, nonprofit, education, a customer is a customer is a customer. However, if you do have government customers, then again, this is your chance to shine. So show that you have done work with the government, either directly or as a subcontractor, if you've worked at the state and local level or something along those lines. And they're going to look for specific data points there, the name of the customer, meaning the entity, your point of contact, his or her phone number, email address, and then a short description of the work that you did there, along with the dates and I believe the dollar amount. The information is all in the solicitation. You'll then have project narratives that must include your statement of work or a copy of the contract. You want to make sure that contract shows the dates, has the signatures, and has to be relevant to the special item number that you're pursuing. So if you're pursuing IT professional services special item number, then you don't want a contract in there that shows the work that you did as a architect, engineer, or HVAC work. So hopefully your business is not that diverse. So and the project narratives, those are also going to be specific questions that GSA will want you to answer. And again, this is really your chance to shine, to show that, hey, we have done this work before, we have the past performance. Here's, you know, why we were selected for the contract, and really just show that, you know, this is in your sweet spot. This is the type of work that you do day in, day out, and that you do have experience doing this. Specific questions here, again, there's also a limit. And so as a best practice on the corporate narrative, the quality control, the references, and the project narratives, in the GSA e-offer platform, they will have each of the questions laid out there, and you'll copy and paste your answers in there. However, as a best practice, there is a section where you can upload documents, and I would highly suggest having each of these also as a PDF that you can upload. So for whatever reason, if the contracting officer is unable to read your copy and paste in that on that platform, that they then have it as a backup that mirrors your answers there. It just makes it a little more professional. It makes it clean. It shows again that you know what you're doing, and that all the documentation is there. Okay, now if you are, I'm not sure if anybody on the line is selling products, but if so, you will need a letter of supply if you are not the manufacturer. So meaning, I would highly suggest, if you are not the manufacturer, that you talk and email or communicate in some way, shape, or form with the manufacturer before you decide to get onto the schedule. Because if the manufacturer decides that he or she does not want to sign this letter of supply, that some of the verbiage in there is prohibitive to their their business, then that's going to be a showstopper. You will need that letter of supply. So make sure before you go down the path that your manufacturer or manufacturers, if you're selling multiple products, are on board. You also want to make sure that you are compliant with the Trade Agreement Acts, which is separate from Buy America Act. Trade Agreement Act, this is going to be a living, breathing list of countries that the U.S. either is accepting their products on the schedule or is not. So for example, China, Argentina, and some other dubious players out there are on this list. However, through various administrations, depending upon what their policies are, that list will change. So you want to make sure that you monitor that Trade Agreement Act list to ensure that if your product is being made in China and China suddenly, let's just say China was not on a list and now suddenly they are, then your product will have to be removed. Same thing with Ability One. This is part of Unicore. Again, this is for product companies only, which is Department of Prisons. So they are making anything from sometimes license plates to uniforms. So if you were, and it's a living, breathing list as well that will change day to day. It's usually not that frequently that it changes, but you cannot offer any product that is being made by Ability One. Now, outside of the schedule, there are, depending upon the solicitation, you can sell these items to the government, just not through the schedule. The schedule has its own hoops that you need to jump through. Okay, so for anyone selling professional services, meaning hourly rates, the labor categories, the LCATs, you'll need a human resources plan for how you compensate overtime and when and how your employees are compensated. You can just usually upload your HR plan, which probably has multiple sections to it, and you just make sure that you've got those two sections covered in there. Okay, questions? And on that technical section, I would say there's a lot of documentation that goes into that, especially with the copies of the contracts. So there, I would give yourself maybe another 2 weeks. Again, this is based on rough average if you're a small business and perhaps kind of doing this yourself. Okay, so now we'll move on to pricing, which is the next component here of the proposal. So as I mentioned earlier, your company, when a buyer's going through the schedule to make a purchase, meaning a government agency, they know if they're going to use the schedule that you have been checked out. This is what all of this documentation is showing, that yes, you've been vetted, you've done this type of work, you've got a quality control process in hand, you're a professional organization, you've got healthy financials, and they also know that your prices have been negotiated and that they are getting the best deal. This is the Costco of government contracting. And they also know that your prices are competitive with the other vendors on the schedule. And how do they know? Well, they've conducted their own, they meaning GSA has conducted their own due diligence and market research, which you go through during the price negotiations. So again, there should be no surprises when you go through negotiations with GSA because that data is right there available to you. So you're either going to have a labor category matrix or your product listing. So I'm assuming most people on the call are providing professional services. So I didn't see too many questions coming in during the when we talked about products. So based on that, you would then have a commercial price list or your market rates and EPA. EPA is your economic price adjustment, which more or less in layman's terms means how you will increase your GSA rates year to year. Now, if anyone has done any sleuthing or just browsing around on any of the GSA sites, you'll see that some companies on their price list only show pricing for 1 year. And that indicates that they use a commercial price list, that their rates change, let's say January 1st of every year or whatever the the process is for that company. Other companies, you'll see their GSA prices are mapped out with a multiplier for the next either 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. And so typically that means that they are using market rates and that they have used a multiplier that has been negotiated with GSA. And there has to be some kind of method to the madness, or the methodology behind the that multiplier. It's usually the Department of Labor, Table 5. You usually can take an average of the last 3 periods, the last 3 years, or something along those lines to come up with a percentage to build out your GSA rates. Both, let's say both kind of strategies here have their pros and cons. If you're using Department of Labor multiplier, then you're kind of subject to these government indicators or rates, which are usually not going to be in your favor. However, it will take the administrative burden off of you and the contracting officer, and your rates will be set throughout your contract period, which again is potentially 20 years. If you have a commercial price list, then you can, you're able to internally increase your commercial rates as high as you want. Now, you're not going to get that same multiplier with your GSA rates, but it might give you a little bit more wiggle room and margin to increase your GSA rates. So maybe you get a 0.5% higher by using your commercial rates and using that as a basis to increase your rates. So once you're on the schedule, let's say you're awarded the schedule tomorrow, you can make a modification to add new products, add new services, add a new special item number, add a new labor category the next day. However, you cannot increase your rates for a 12-month period if you have used the commercial rates. Now, if you did the market rates, then your rates, like I said, are built out for the next either 5, 10, 15, or 20-year period. Here's where we get into the backup documentation. So for each and every line item that you want to propose to GSA, you're going to need to show an invoice to show that you have sold this item, this service, this software, this professional service in the past. So if you've got a program manager level 1, a program manager level 2, and a program manager level 3, and they're all at different hourly rates, and they have different years of experience and different educational requirements, then you'll need 3 different invoices, one for the project manager level 1, one for the level 2, and then one for the level 3. And invoice is the best justification to use. That's a very clean proposal to GSA. They're not going to be like, oh, this company is just submitting quote sheets. To have a strong proposal just makes the process that much smoother. And it also just, again, makes you more credible in the eyes of GSA as they're reviewing the rest of your proposal. So if you don't have that invoice, you can use, like I said, if you've got an IDIQ or something that a list that you're on, contract that you've been awarded, but you haven't invoiced anything, you can use those, that documentation, or you can use proposals. But my preference for customers that we work with to help them get onto the schedule is to have an invoice, to go in with a strong offer, to be a strong company that knows the ropes and is not, still just learning the acronyms of government contracting. You'll then assemble your price proposal, which is a spreadsheet that is in the solicitation that you can find on the GSA site or on the Beta SAM site. There's specific columns and data that you'll populate, including any customers that you've given, or the customer that you've given the best discount to for each and every line item. And then GSA will conduct that competitive analysis, which you should have done in advance of going down this path and getting this far in the proposal. And you can do that again on the GSAadvantage.gov or the Calc site. The next 2 pieces here are your commercial sales practice, which provide a little bit of data, most importantly, really disclosing who your most favorite customer is and what sort of discounts, concessions, and any other sort of special perks that those customers get, and ensuring that you are offering GSA something that is equal to or better than your most favored customer. And it's not your favorite customer because they've got a really cool logo or you love their office space. Most favorite customers who is getting your best discount. And then your fair and reasonable statement is saying, hey, GSA, we're offering you, pricing that is equal to or better than our most favored customer, and it's also, within, 1 or 2 percentage points of the GSA average for these same prices. Okay. When a company has a GSA schedule, are they required to go in and update their catalog on a regular basis? So yes, and right now, because of the post-award requirements, there's many. I put that in the bucket of contract administration, and there's a couple components there. One is going to be ensuring that your price list that's on the GSA Advantage site is current and accurate. So as GSA went through consolidations over the years, these SIN numbers, the special item numbers, have changed. So you may do some research today or tomorrow or whenever on GSA Advantage and see that somebody shows some special item numbers, I don't know, 541-4 or 132-51. Those are old SIN numbers that have now been migrated to these new SIN numbers, which are more or less, like I said, 6 digits that somewhat mirror the NAICS codes in certain examples or certain SINs. And then for anyone that has pricing already built out for the 5, 10, or 15 years, sometimes your price list on GSA Advantage will have all of those years shown, and that makes it a little bit easier. For companies that have commercial rates, if you're going in then on that annual basis on the anniversary of your award date to increase your prices, and that's basically going to require a modification with GSA and some more paperwork and more effort. But again, you may come out a little bit ahead versus using market rates. So anytime you're making a modification, any changes to your contract, whether it's the address changes, your contract administrator changes, the SIN number changes, your pricing changes, you're then going to have to update your price list and make those changes. Okay. On here. So that last document that I mentioned, or the second to last, is the commercial sales practice, typically known as the CSP. It's the most important document in the submission because it is disclosing who is your best customer, meaning who's getting your best discounts, what's the frequency of those discounts, and kind of what's the rationale and reasoning behind that. And this is really the where you can be strategic and where companies sometimes get caught up. So you're disclosing your internal pricing policies and discounts, and these are your standard discounts. So meaning, let's say you've got your price list. It doesn't matter if you're selling products or services or software. And every time your company deals with a nonprofit, you give a 10% discount. That would just be a standard discount, meaning that it's just automatically happens. It's part of your process. All of your sales reps know it. Your bookkeeper, your accounting team, they're familiar with it. So whatever the rates are, it's minus 10%. Now, there may be some non-standard discounts, meaning, let's say, you started your company 4 years ago and suddenly Boeing comes to you and you've never worked with any of the Fortune companies, and so you say, wow, we'd love to have this customer, have this organization as a customer. They'd be a flagship customer. We could put this, on our website, on the capability statement. It would be a great touting point. So you decide to give them a crazy discount, and it's just a one-time discount because you really want to work with Boeing. And let's say they're integrated at FAA, and you've been trying to get in there for, I don't know, the last couple of years and unsuccessful. So you feel like If you give them this, crazy discount, they're going to work with you and you'll be able to leverage the relationship. So you give them a 15% discount. And that was just a one-time, we'll say, spot discount, simply just to win the business. That would be under the non-standard category. And it's important that to differentiate here, because when you say to GSA that you have standard discounts, GSA will want something that will want your GSA rate to be comparable to your standard discounts. Now, if you have this one-time kind of spot discount that is not part of your normal practice, it was just a one-time discount to win the business because we wanted to leverage the relationship they had at FAA, and you gave Boeing a, let's say, 20% discount, do you then need to give that to GSA? No, as long as you can explain that this was just a one-time non-standard discount. And so you would need a pretty strong narrative there. And again, really important in this document and really explaining the differences that you have between standard and non-standard. And some companies have absolutely no discounts. Maybe you just have a set price for everything that you do for each of your labor categories, and you've never deviated off of that. That's fine. Then you would just list 0% discount, and nobody gets any discounts. Everyone is paying the same prices. So another way to look at it here, maybe just another visual. Again, this is sometimes much easier in person with a whiteboard and just kind of fielding some live questions. But your standard discounts, again, are part of just your normal practice. Everybody in the company knows that anytime we deal with, I don't know, a nonprofit, a church, an educational institution, we give a 10% discount. And again, your non-standard, and GSA will want something that is equal to or better than your standard discounts, plus has to also then fall into that average on the calc or the GSA Advantage site. And then your non-standard discounts, these are just one-time spot discounts that you need to be able to articulate in a written narrative. And you also want to make sure it does not, this is very important, that it's not a large portion of your overall revenue. So if that contract with Boeing, and let's say Lockheed Martin also came to you and you gave them a 20% discount, and I don't know, CACI also came to you and you gave them a 15, 18% discount, and those three companies make up 80% of your revenue, well, GSA is going to have a problem, not problem with that, but they're going to use that to negotiate and say, hey, look, this seems like it's part of your standard policies because it represents a large portion of your overall revenue. So they will want those same discounts. So a way to show that these are non-standard discounts, you can have other invoices showing that it's really not a standard practice, that we're not giving a 20% discount for the program manager. Here's 5 other invoices showing the program manager is really billed at $75 an hour or whatever that number is. So make sure that GSA does not push you into the non-standard discounts, and make sure that when you are disclosing all this information, that you're presenting it in a light that's favorable for you and not favorable for the government. And I think the next slide, yeah, so GSA will want something that, again, is equal to or better than your most favored customer on the standard discounts. So let me just go back a slide. So again, everything on the left, GSA will want, they will try to, they will try their best to try to get your non-standard discounts, but again, you just need to be strong and argue that those were, in fact, just that non-standard one-time spot discounts. Okay, and just to kind of recap here, GSA will conduct 2 litmus tests. The first, again, is the internal pricing discounts, and that's just everything we talked about, your standard discounts. And then the external is looking at who are the other schedule holders that also are selling program managers or widgets or software or whatever it is that you're providing. And your reference there again is that calc site or GSA Advantage. And as I have here in all caps, in advance, make sure that you have done the homework, because the worst thing to do is waste all this time putting together a proposal, putting together the technical, getting your financials, pulling invoices, submit your offer, waiting a couple months, getting to negotiations with GSA, and you think that, you know, your rate of $75 an hour is going to work, and they say, oh, the average GSA rate is $35. Well, obviously that's just an extreme example here that I'm using, but that information is available to you. It's free, it's public, use it. And also use it in your negotiations to show that, hey, there's other companies out there that that are charging a higher rate than what we're proposing to you, GSA, all things being equal, meaning the education requirements are the same and the years of experience are the same. And then post-award, let's say you've submitted your offer to GSA, you've gone through and answered the questions, which they call the clarifications, you've gone through the negotiations, and then you're at this point of then getting the award, and now you have a heartbeat, you are on the schedule. So your GSA rates are now only a price ceiling, meaning a not to exceed rate. So through your schedule, you're actually encouraged to go lower than your GSA rates. So let's say you're on the schedule and the Air Force comes out with an RFP and your GSA rate for program manager level 1 is $75 an hour, and they need 100 program managers. So most likely you will probably come in and bid at, you know, something lower than the $75. So as you again are kind of considering, is the GSA schedule, is there anything in it for me, which is really the title here of today's course. You want to make sure that you've got some wiggle room once you're on this schedule to still, not wiggle room, that you have some margin, to be more specific, that you're going to make money. And with lower rates, lower margins, you're going to need heavy volume. So heavy volume to me is either can be diagrammed in a couple different ways. One is a pretty full pipeline of a lot of GSA schedule opportunities, or maybe it's just a few GSA schedule opportunities that are really, really big that you have a more than 70% chance of perhaps winning. So again, make sure that you know that your GSA rates are a not to exceed rate, and that you're typically not going to be bidding at that rate. You'll be bidding lower. So through your schedule, you can go lower. Outside of your schedule, so if you're a larger organization or you're selling to commercial and other entities, you cannot bid lower than your GSA rate. So that's, it's a liability or repercussion at times of being on the schedule. So I think I have an example in the next slide. Yeah. So let's say your GSA awarded rate, so you're on the schedule, you've got an hourly rate, or your widget is $100. If somebody purchases from you through the schedule, let's say you've offered them $95 and they take it, that's fine, because you're encouraged to go lower through your schedule. Now let's say Department of Commerce comes to you and they're not purchasing through the schedule. That it doesn't matter if it's government, doesn't matter if it's McDonald's or Boeing, you can go higher, you just cannot go lower. And let me just stay on that slide, because if you do go lower, let's say Department of Commerce comes to you and they want your services, but they're not purchasing through the schedule, and you go lower, then you have violated, again, this price reduction clause, and you're going to have to contact GSA and lower your rates. So again, the whole focus, 99% of the schedule, the GSA schedule, is focused on GSA obtaining and securing your lowest rates. And then once they obtain that, then you're encouraged to bid lower than your GSA rate. And GSA, this kind of comes into post-award compliance, administration, cost of doing business. GSA will come out and conduct audits, which they don't really call audits, they call them customer assisted visits, but it's pretty much an audit, because they will be asking you to pull invoices, commercial invoices, any type of invoice, anything from your accounting system that where you are selling the same services or products as what you have listed on the schedule. And really what they're looking for there, it shouldn't be any surprise, is they want to make sure that you're not giving somebody outside of GSA a lower rate. If so, then again, you realize that that you then have violated this this clause. So keep that in mind. And again, just be very, very aware that price is the whole focus of this schedule. And you need to know, it's kind of a mathematical answer here, and a very simple, maybe not simple, but it's a yes or no. You know, is the schedule, can you live with these lower rates? Can you live with them? Can you be profitable? Can your business flourish and function? Do you have other perhaps revenue streams where you are a little bit more profitable? So I talked about some of the timelines here, which usually ends up being a common question when we're in person delivering this type of content for small businesses that perhaps want to pursue this on their own and kind of DIY, do it yourself. So for that administrative section, 1 to 2 weeks. Again, it's not going to take you 8 hours every day for 5 to 10 days. This is kind of considering if you're a small business and you're doing this on the side while trying to run your business as well, and that sort of thing. The technical, 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even 3, and then pricing 2 to 3 weeks. Your quality control review, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody from the outside who is looking at the documentation kind of fresh to review it. And I would say 1 to 2 weeks there. And so you could kind of get this done. Realistically, it's probably closer to 2 months. And then once you submit, I think I have you'll submit through the GSA offer system, unlocked with a digital certificate or the new sign-on. Usually in about a day or so, you get a welcome letter from GSA. But I would give yourself, a day to kind of go through and upload that offer, because there are a lot of components to it. You want to make sure that you're looking at it with fresh eyes and you haven't missed anything. So maybe take a couple days, or at least slate a specific week to kind of check that off. So you'll then submit the offer, you'll get a welcome letter, and then usually you're going to get this bank request that will be sent to you, and you'll forward that on to your bank. That's the standard form 527 that I mentioned earlier. They usually give you a due date, and it can be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to return that. So make sure that you don't violate any of the due dates, and that you are kind of keeping track of this as well, or that you have some sort of project or program manager who's kind of following the due dates and the timelines. Once you've passed muster on the financials, again, you should have healthy financials, not showing any losses. The companies that do the best on the GSA schedule are those that have been in business, probably have a couple of government contracts under their belt, either direct or as subcontractors, or some sort of mentor protege or JV program. But anyway, GSA will then come back to you typically with clarifications. And this is, I'll call it a kind of a Q&A session. And they may want additional invoices. They may want clarification on some of the documentation that you submitted. Basically, it's just additional information that they want from you. And the way that this works, let's say they send you this email with the questions on Monday. They may want their answers, I don't know, Monday afternoon, and then they want their answers Wednesday at 9 a.m. So make sure again that you're managing this, that you're not missing any due dates. And then once you submit your answers on that Wednesday at 9 a.m. or before, you're probably not going to hear from them for either a week, 2 weeks, or a couple weeks. And then this can also be 2 or 3 rounds. So you answer their questions, then they may have additional questions. And it'll be the same thing, kind of hurry up and wait, hurry up, give us our answer. And then you'll probably be waiting for, like I said, about 2 weeks or so for them to come back again. It's usually no more than 2 rounds of clarifications, 1 or none if you have a very, very clean offer, which again, is what I would highly recommend, meaning that you're not kind of using that you're using just the preferred method of justification, that you have a compliant and competitive offer. And then once you have answered their questions, they will typically set up price negotiations, and this can either be done over the phone. Sometimes it's just done over email. It really just is at the discretion of the contracting officer. And so what they will do is look at the prices that you have proposed to them, and they will typically counter by saying, oh, the average rate for the program manager is actually, $70, and you guys are proposing 75. So we need you to come down to 70. Then that's where you can use the data that you have that you've pulled up on the calc site as well, just to show that that you kind of disagree. And so you can go through 2 or 3 rounds here of negotiations, counter offer, counter to the counter. They're also going to ask here for prompt payment discounts and volume discounts. So, and don't feel like you need to automatically just say yes to GSA and go to these lower rates, because again, keep in mind your GSA rates are a price ceiling, and you're going to need to bid 9 times out of 10 through your schedule at rates lower than what you've been awarded. And this can take anywhere from the negotiations 2 weeks to 1 month. It's usually, I'd say, we've been seeing more and more just this interaction happening more over email than it is over phone. I will say this: if you are on the phone during a price negotiation and they say, hey, instead of you're offering us a 3% discount, we want a 5% discount, don't feel like you need to give them an answer right then and there. And I've seen this happen in the past. So you can say to GSA, hey, we need to run some numbers internally. Let us get back to you tomorrow by close of business. Give them a specific date and time that you will return their call, or return the counter offer. And that way you can then say, hey, instead of giving you 5%, we can give you 4%, and how about we give you we'll throw in a prompt payment discount. So once you've agreed to everything on the negotiations, and there's more to it, but just in the interest of time, those are kind of the highlights that you want to be cognizant of. Once everyone is kind of agreed to agree on the various terms and conditions, they will send over the FPR, which is the final proposal revision letter. It's basically a Word document that recaps your terms and conditions. Send that, sign that, send that, review it, sign it, send it back to them, and then usually within a day to a week, you'll have your award. And what does that mean? It should mean the clock is ticking, and you should then at that point be going into your pipeline to say, hey, Joe Smith at Department of whatever, we've got our GSA schedule, we've got a heartbeat, here's our schedule number, and you should really start going back in to capitalize on these opportunities that have been sitting in your pipeline waiting for you to have the schedule. If you don't have that pipeline of opportunities, then again, I would say you probably want to hold off before you go down this path. I can't say that enough. Post-award, you're going to have to upload your price list through what's called SIP. It's the Schedule Input Program. It's as functional as Atari from the 1970s or 80s. However far Atari goes back, I don't know. For any young people on the call that are not familiar with Atari, the SIP program is just very archaic and not very user-friendly. But that's the portal by which you upload your price list that then magically makes your price list appear on the gsaadvantage.gov website. You want to then register for the RFP notifications on GSA eBuy, the sales reporting through the FAS system, and everything else. There's some post-award best practices. I'm just going to try to wind up here quickly so I can take any last-minute questions and then send the slides out to you guys. So just maybe this is more kind of just marketing and to me kind of logical 101 here, things that you should do that, if you've gone through the headache of getting on the schedule and you're stuck with these low rates, what should you do? So you want to market yourself and let people know that, hey, you can now get to me through this other mechanism. So you were then allowed to put the GSA logo on your website. You should then, in my opinion, have that link to your GSA Advantage price list, make it easy for your customer to find you, to find your prices, to find your schedule number, to be able to call the phone number that's on your price list, or have an actual point of contact name and phone number to reach out to. You want to have that your GSA schedule number in your auto signature, in your capability statement, any marketing materials on the back of your business card, you know, anywhere and everywhere you can think of to put that logo just to show, hey, this is another mechanism, this is a bridge on how you can get to me. If you do any press releases, anything on LinkedIn, you know, it's in GSA's best interest to also promote you. So because they're going to recap that that industrial funding fee that you're going to pay them. So they want you to market the fact that you have the schedule. So I say, if you're going to do it, then flaunt it and let everybody know that you have it. You also want to, just as part of best practices, after being on the schedule, well, even while you're, whether you have a schedule or not, you want to always touch the folks in your pipeline. Make sure that you have that back office compliance, which can sometimes be outsourced, or if you have an internal, let's say, bookkeeper or finance team, they can probably help with some of the reporting and monitoring your prices to make sure that you're not violating any price reduction clause issues with the schedule. GSA will also, because it is an open and rolling RFP, as they make updates to the solicitation, they may put in, you know, now you have to, I don't know, jump through this hoop. The new vendors then that are trying to get onto the schedule will have to now jump through that hoop. However, existing vendors will receive an email that GSA has made a change to the solicitation that you'll then now have to accept. So you're just going through the GSA portal and accept the new modification. That doesn't take a ton of time, but it is something that you want to monitor and make sure that you're saying yes and checking boxes to things that you actually should be and that are accurate. As far as vendor initiated mods, those would be if you had a commercial price list and you wanted to increase your prices, that's a modification. It's paperwork that goes in through the GSA eMod system, and then you would then have to update your price list after the modification was approved. If you change your address, if you get bought out by another company, that becomes then a novation agreement. There's all different sort of a variety of modifications that can be made from both the vendor side as well as the GSA side to your schedule. Again, the most important best practice is the upfront homework. So I can't reiterate that enough. And hopefully now we have about 15 minutes or so for questions. I'm not going to read anybody's name. So any slides you want me to go back to, or anything here, I'm happy to recap or re-answer. If anything was not clear. I'm not sure, Lisa, if you're still there, if there's anything you want to add or say or chime in on.
I'm muted.
Actually, I had a client email me while you were speaking.
Okay.
And they asked, when a company has a GSA schedule, are they required to go in and update their catalog on a regular basis?
Yes, so their GSA price list, I think I did read that question off and thought I answered, but we'll go again here. So yeah, if you make any changes, whether it's an address change, you update your pricing, you add a new special item number, you add new product software or labor, you will need to obviously submit a modification first to do that, get the modification approved. Obviously that requires a lot of paperwork and back and forth with GSA and potentially negotiations depending upon what your modification is. And then your price list should then accurately reflect those changes. Now, because GSA went through this consolidation and the SIN numbers changed and some of the terms and conditions change, everybody now has to update their current price list to reflect the new SIN numbers and some of the new verbiage. So yeah, there's not a set cadence for that. It's as needed based on either GSA changes or vendor initiated changes. Let me see here. Another question is, can you go back and review the 7.5% GSA fee? It's actually 0.75%, so it's less than 1%. That is on all GSA contracts awarded through GSA Schedule. Yes, so if you have a GSA schedule and let's say you have a $5 million contract with the Air Force, but it is not through the schedule, you owe GSA absolutely nothing. If that contract is through the schedule, then you owe GSA 0.75%. It's actually kind of a wash because if we had time to dig into pricing further, that percentage gets built into your rates. You're kind of a processor that collects the fee, and then the agency actually is, the buyer is more or less kind of paying that. And this is why department-wide contract vehicles have popped up. So it's 0.75%, so less than 1%. If you have 0 sales through your schedule, you'll still need to report 0 to GSA. But the only thing you're going to pay that fee on is only your GSA schedule sales. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. There's contact information. Feel free to reach out if we can answer anything. If there was any question you did not feel comfortable asking here, happy to take phone calls, or email is preferred, especially for today. It's kind of a busy day, but there's a lot of information also on the GSA website. If you download the solicitation, it's just like any other, all the documents and required information will be there. So I think, oh, one more question here. This was informative. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. Thanks to Lisa Wood and the great team over at the Virginia PTAP. They've been a great resource and always have been for government contractors. So feel free to reach out to them for counseling, mentorship, virtual matchmaking, and just a lot of good information. So thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity to present today, and thanks for the great audience. And again, always happy to take any questions today, or at any time that you guys have questions. We've got probably 20 plus webinars, videos on our website on GSA schedule. So if this was not clear, we've got some more tutorials that are all free and complimentary. Okay, thank you all. Thank you for the nice words. Appreciate it. Okay, and we'll get the slides out to you as well as the recording. Have a good rest of your week. We're partially over the hump here, and 2 more days until the weekend. So thanks, everybody.